You're listening to Keith Sports News. All right. Welcome to KSN episode 36. That's right. I am back to my normal schedule, hopefully. Mondays and Fridays, episodes will be, at least 30 minutes or more. Depends on how much there is to talk about. But yeah, last couple episodes were nothing about pro wrestling talk. And now I'm back talking about the sports leagues that I follow and know what's going on. All right. It has been quite some time. All right. So, yes, I'm back in the living room. This might be, I guess, my permanent spot for a while. I think I like it. I think this is the best spot yet for this channel. Has great lighting. And yeah. So, hope y'all had a great weekend. The last weekend of April. That's right. And if you're watching the video, the shirt that I'm wearing, that's right. The Houston Roughnecks shirt. And look right here. I think I showed you this before, but I'll show it again. Yeah, it says XFL. So I got this shirt from the XFL website a couple of years ago when they were in the XFL in 2023. I just don't understand, why aren't they in the XFL conference? If you follow the UFL, you know what I'm talking about. The Houston Roughnecks, they are a UFL team. They came from the XFL, from 2023. And for some reason, they're not in the XFL conference. The UFL has two conferences, one for the XFL teams and one for the USFL teams. For some reason, the Houston Roughnecks are in the USFL conference, and it makes no sense because the players and the coaching staff, they came from the Houston Gamblers. The Houston Gamblers were a USFL team from 2023. So, shouldn't they be called the Houston Gamblers? That would make more sense. Why did they decide to keep the Houston Roughnecks name and uniforms, but keep the Houston Gamblers roster and coaching staff? I don't know how they came up with that decision, but that is very strange to me. They should be the Houston Gamblers, in my opinion, because it's the same coaching staff from the 2023 Houston Gamblers. And they're in the USFL conference, so they should be called the Houston Gamblers. I don't have a Gambler shirt, but the Houston Gamblers have much better uniforms than the Houston Roughnecks, in my opinion. The Houston Roughnecks uniforms suck, especially their helmets. I don't know why their helmets are, you have one side of the helmet, navy blue, the other side of the helmet, it's half of it is white, the other half it's red with a number on top. Why can't you just stick with one color? I saw a comment saying that, yeah, the Houston Roughnecks helmets are weird looking. I think it would be great if they can just go to one color, the navy blue color. This shirt that I'm wearing is navy blue. I think that would be much better. They would look much better. I mean, you can say, "Oh, that's just copying the Houston Texans from the NFL. Their helmets are navy blue." Okay, well, maybe they should bring back the 2020 Houston Gamblers uniforms because those were the best ones. Those were the best uniforms. But for some reason, they can't do that. And I mentioned that the 2020 XFL season was a really great season until COVID happened. And I mentioned, a while ago or so, if I have to bring back one sports league that didn't have to get canceled, it would definitely be the XFL in 2020. No question. Yeah, it was during March Madness. March Madness was about to begin, but they've had March Madness for many, many years. This was, at the time, the first real spring football league, spring football season in a long time, And then COVID just had to happen. Like, what if the XFL came back in 2019 instead of 2020? You know what I'm saying? Just bad luck, man. Bad luck. Or I wouldn't mind if COVID happened after the 2020 XFL season came to an end, which would have been in like July. I know I'm still complaining about that, but you know why? The main reason why is because the Houston Roughnecks at the time, they were the best XFL team in 2020 because they were undefeated. The season, I think they were like 5-0. Season's about half over. The regular season's about half over. Then COVID had to happen. Yeah. And then it took them another 3 years for them to come back. I wonder if that's the reason why the USFL decided to make a return in 2022, which I think is stupid. Even though I enjoyed the league watching their games, but half of the teams, if not more than half of the teams, were not playing in their own stadium, their home city. The New Orleans Breakers, they weren't playing any of their games in New Orleans. They were playing their games in Birmingham, Alabama. Like, why? That's stupid. And then you have a bunch of empty seats in the stands. Like, that is not a good look. That was not a good look for the USFL. I guess they wanted to bring it back because the XFL failed. Maybe the USFL people, well, the XFL failed. Let's bring back the USFL. Yeah, let's see what happens. And then 2023, both USFL and XFL had their seasons. And then last year was the first season of the UFL, the merger. Okay? So, and yeah, the rest is history, I guess. So I guess we'll begin with the UFL because since I am wearing this shirt, I'm going to talk about the UFL, all right? I watched 2 UFL games live. That's right. I watched 2 UFL games live. Last weekend, I didn't watch any of the games live because of WrestleMania weekend. However, I watched the highlight videos on their YouTube channel, so thankfully I was able to catch up on those. And one of those games, this was probably the biggest surprise all season so far. This is from last weekend. Okay, it was the winless San Antonio Brahmas against the undefeated DC Defenders in DC. So when I clicked on the highlight video, I was watching it. I was like, "Oh, there's no way. No way San Antonio's going to beat DC in DC. No, that ain't going to happen." It happened. The winless San Antonio Brahmas beat the undefeated DC Defenders on the road. That's surprising. And you can bet on these games. Yeah. Have you heard of ESPN Bet? They've been advertising that like crazy. You can bet on like anything in the game. It's crazy. I've never got into that. Eventually I might actually get into that. I don't know. I haven't really looked into that yet. I've never bet on sports, but recent years, sports betting has become huge, so maybe at some point I'll get into that. But after that game, a winless team beat an undefeated team on the road? After that game, it's not easy. Not easy betting on these UFL games. Speaking of the San Antonio Brahmas, I watched that team against the Houston Roughnecks team. Okay, we might as well talk about that next. That was the second UFL game that I saw or watched live. It was Sunday afternoon from 2 to 5 p.m. Central Time. I was available, so it was my chance to watch the game. I watched the game. I muted the broadcast because while I was watching the game, I was listening to some of my favorite podcasts on SiriusXM because I'm a little behind. I want to catch up on certain shows that I really like listening to. So I was listening to those shows while I was watching the UFL game. Okay? So it was the Houston Roughnecks against the San Antonio Brahmas in San Antonio. And my gosh. The game was on ESPN. And if you look at their score bug, in the middle, you'll see the over-under. I believe the over-under was like 35.5 or 38.5. And I was like, yeah, this is under for sure because Houston Roughnecks, they don't score that many points. I don't think San Antonio scores that many points either. So I didn't bet on that. But I'm like, when I saw that, I was like, yeah, I got the under for sure, So, yeah. So the game was in the Alamo Dome. Let me say this, the Alamo Dome has great fans. There was a lot of fans in the stands, kind of like the St. Louis Battlehawks, the Dome at America Center. They have great fans. I think I know why. Because San Antonio doesn't have an NFL team, and St. Louis doesn't have an NFL team. St. Louis used to have the Rams for many years, but then the Rams moved back to LA. So thankfully, St. Louis kept the Dome at America Center. Okay. San Antonio Alamo Dome. The Alamo Dome is home to the UTSA Roadrunners in college football. Okay. That's a great dome. And every year they have the Alamo Bowl. That's a big bowl game that they would have every year. So, this pillow is in the shot. It's the Easter Bunny pillowcase. Yeah, we still have that, if you're wondering. Anyways, so yeah, I think that so yeah, San Antonio and St. Louis, they don't have NFL teams, and that's probably the reason why a lot of their fans went to their home games because they actually care. Um, you know, unlike the Michigan Panthers, they are a pretty good team this year, but you know, it's weird. They share the same stadium with the Detroit Lions. They play their games in Ford Field, their home games. Um, I once saw a game in Ford Field. Well, not in person, but on TV, and there was a lot of empty stands. But that was at the beginning of the season, so yeah. I have not seen a Birmingham Stallions game in Birmingham, but I'm sure they have a lot of their fans because they won three straight spring football championships. They won the 2022 and 2023 USFL championships, and they won last year's UFL championship. So they are a great team. Skip Holtz, the son of legendary coach Lou Holtz, you know. So let me see here. Arlington, yeah, there's usually a lot of empty stands in that stadium. Choctaw Stadium, I think that's the name of it. That stadium used to be the former uh, Texas Ranger Stadium. Used to be called Globe Life Park. Yeah, the Texas Rangers, they used to play in that stadium, but then they got a new stadium with a roof, Globe Life Field. So then they renovated Globe Life Park, renamed it the Choctaw Field, home of the Arlington Renegades. There's usually a lot of empty stands for their games, probably because Arlington has the Dallas Cowboys. You know, what else? Houston Roughnecks, usually, yeah. Their first game, not many fans in the stands. Although it was at the same exact time with the Houston Astros game in Houston. That was stupid. Whoever made that schedule, you should have known better. You should have known better. Okay? And I know the city of Houston, they like the Houston Astros more than the Texans and the Rockets. That's the truth. They really do, you know? So, because Houston, there's a lot of Hispanics, Mexicans there. Oh, they love baseball. They do, you know? I mean, they love football and basketball as well, but they love baseball's their number one for them, for those people. All right. So I talked about Arlington, San Antonio, Houston, Birmingham, Detroit. There's three more. St. Louis. Okay, so two more. DC. DC has great fans too. However, their stadium is very small because it's also a soccer venue. Yeah, it's a soccer venue. If you watch DC Defenders home games, if you look at the field, it's like a soccer styled field, if you know what I'm saying. And then the Memphis Showboats. I think the Memphis Showboats have the least amount of fans whenever the Showboats play at home. Because I once saw a Showboats game on television in Memphis. Holy crap, there's a ton of empty stands. I guess the city of Memphis just doesn't care about their football team. Memphis doesn't have an NFL team, although Tennessee Titans, that's in Nashville, so that's not super far away from Memphis, but still, that's really embarrassing. But I think the Memphis Showboats are probably the worst UFL team. They've only won one game so far. So, yeah. Anyways, back to the game. Back to the game that I was watching live. It was the Houston Roughnecks against the San Antonio Brahmas. I predicted it would be a low-scoring game because usually the Houston Roughnecks, they don't score that many points. All right. boy, I was wrong. This was the best Roughnecks game in a while. They crushed the Brahmas in San Antonio. They crushed the team that beat the undefeated team on the road. Isn't that crazy? I mean, wow. Like, that's why these games are hard to bet on, you know? Yeah, the Roughnecks dominating performance. Brahmas had no offense whatsoever. The Roughnecks won 27-3 on the road. Wow. Oh, by the way, I'm glad this popped into my head. I found out that Wade Phillips is no longer the San Antonio Brahmas coach. Something happened to him. Let me look him up and see what it says here. Wade Phillips used to be the Houston Roughnecks coach in 2023, the XFL team. So then, when the merger happened, UFL, they decided to keep the Roughnecks name, but they wanted to keep the Gamblers coaching staff. That sucked, because I've always liked Wade Phillips. Now, Wade Phillips, he's an old guy. This guy, I in a previous episode, I did mention his coaching history, which is crazy. So there was I think he one or two games. You know how the head coaches, they're usually on the sidelines. Well, for him, he was in the booth. Okay, so it says here, Wikipedia, Phillips suffered a medical emergency during the Brahmas' April 13 game against the Michigan Panthers, forcing Peyton Pardee, who had just been promoted to offensive coordinator that week, to take over head coaching duties for the remainder of the game. He took a personal leave of absence for the remainder of the 2025 season on April 16, 2025, naming Pardee as his successor. The Phillips and Pardee families had a long personal connection, dating to when Phillips's father, Bum, had coached Pardee's grandfather, Jack Pardee, in college. Okay. Well, I hope Wade Phillips is doing well. That's a shame that had to happen to him, because everyone loves Wade Phillips. So, yeah, I don't know. He may not coach ever again. He's going to be 78 on June 21st. That's getting up there, I think he might be right before he left, right before he took a personal leave, I think he might have been the oldest professional football coach in history at the age of 77, soon to be 78. I can't think of another head coach that's even older than him, either right now or in the past. Yeah. I guess the current old coach right now is Bill Belichick, although he's in college football right now. I think Pete Carroll is back. Isn't Pete Carroll back coaching? But he's on the yeah, Pete Carroll is back, but he's currently the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, and he's 73, and he looks fantastic for his age. So he's got a lot of energy too. So, man, I do wish the Vegas Raiders well. I do, because the Raiders, that's one of those teams that has sucked for many years, So, and Vegas is the money city, so come on now, Vegas Raiders, at some point they got to step it up. So anyways, I hope Wade Phillips is doing well. Probably just resting at home, So yeah, San Antonio. They got crushed 27-3. Very surprising. Houston beat the team that beat the undefeated DC Defenders last weekend. This was the Houston Roughnecks' best game in a while. Best game all season I've ever seen from this team. And yes, you can say they are my favorite team because they are the closest team to me. I live in South Louisiana, even though Houston's pretty far away. I wish they kept the New Orleans Breakers. That would be great because I would definitely go to some New Orleans Breakers games. Yeah. After the last time I saw the Houston Roughnecks play before they played the San Antonio Brahmas, they look really bad. They don't look like they don't look like they even belong in the UFL. I was like, man, they should just get rid of this team. Bring back the Seattle Sea Dragons because that team had great fans in the XFL. I think the reason why they didn't want to keep the Seattle Sea Dragons is because they're so far away from all the other teams. But at the same time, man, you have 3 Texas teams. That's just me. I don't know, more if this UFL league does well for the next couple of years, maybe they'll bring back more teams, and maybe we'll have 5 teams in each conference. Maybe they'll bring back 2 more teams. We'll see. So, all right, and the other game that I saw live was on Saturday night between the Michigan Panthers and the St. Louis Battlehawks. That's right. I was in the mood to watch that game. That game came on right after the conclusion, the final day of the NFL draft, which I'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay? So, I didn't realize the Michigan Panthers were that good of a team. At the time, they had 1 loss. All right? St. Louis, they had a tough home game against the DC Defenders. This game was great. This was, in my opinion, probably the best UFL game I've ever saw live. Or at least this season. Okay? Joe Tessitore on commentary with Jordan Rogers, from college football. He's great. It's crazy. Joe Tessitore is also the voice of Friday Night SmackDown in WWE. And then the following night, he called a UFL game in St. Louis. So I wonder if was Friday Night SmackDown not too far away from St. Louis? I mean, that's crazy, man. One night you're calling pro wrestling, the next night you're calling a football game. So, he's great. And this was a great game. It was a back and forth game in the 4th quarter. If you missed that game, I recommend you watching the highlights. Yes, I recommend you checking out the highlights of that game because, in my opinion, to me, this was like the best UFL game I've ever seen, or at least this season, probably the game of the year. So, really great game. I wanted St. Louis to win, mainly because, in my opinion, they have the best fans, and which they did. They did win. They won the game by a score of 32-27. Very close game. And another reason why I want the Battlehawks to win is because which they did win, so that the team records would be even, and that's what happened. After that game, the Panthers and the Battlehawks have the same win-loss record, okay? Great game. And one of my subscribers that actually do follow these episodes, you know who you are. 5Tayer, that's your favorite team, right? Yeah, great game. So, yeah, those were the 2 games that I saw. The two games that I didn't get to see, the Friday night game, this was surprising. This was surprising. The Memphis Showboats, which I said earlier, probably the worst team in the UFL, they beat the UFL champions, or I should say the 3-time spring football champions, the Birmingham Stallions, in Birmingham in overtime. I believe this was the first overtime game this season. Wow. And you know what? I didn't see the highlights. I didn't see the highlights because when I saw that, I was like, yeah, no way, no way the Memphis Showboats won that game, and they did. So later I'm going to watch the highlights, even though I know who won, which team won, but I want to see how it went out, This is why the UFL is really cool, because you just don't know what's going to happen. At this point, any team can beat any team. And last weekend, the winless San Antonio Brahmas beat the undefeated DC Defenders in DC. And then this weekend, or this past weekend, I should say, the worst team, Memphis Showboats, beat the 3-time back-to-back-to-back spring football champs, the Birmingham Stallions in Birmingham. Crazy. And then the other game that I didn't see, which was the first game on Sunday, the early Sunday game. I heard this was a good game, great game. The DC Defenders against the Arlington Renegades. The Defenders won 37-33. That's probably the highest scoring UFL game. A total of 70 points combined. Wow. I'll have to watch the highlights of that game as well. Okay, but the best game that I saw live was the Michigan Panthers and the St. Louis Battlehawks. It was a very great game. Back and forth, back and forth. Let me tell you something. The St. Louis Battlehawks coach, what's his name? His name is Anthony, but what's his last name? I forgot what his last name is. Anthony Becht. Yeah. Man, he's really into this. He's really into this. He wanted to win that game so bad. You can tell, man. You can tell. And at one point during the game, the commentators were like talking to him while the game is happening. This is why the UFL is really cool. They do their own things. You got like body cams. You got chest cams from players. You got drones. You got Dean Blandino talking to the officials while he is the vice president of football officiating. He's the guy that reviews the plays, You can challenge any play at any time. See, the NFL doesn't do any of that stuff, Well, actually, the only thing the NFL does is the UFL kickoff format. I really don't know why the NFL decided to go with that kickoff format. I forgot what the reason is, but I heard a lot of people don't like that the NFL is doing that. I wonder if they're going to change that. I don't know, but yeah, the UFL is really cool. You got sideline reporters interviewing the players after they score a touchdown. That's so cool. That is so cool, man. They put on a show. UFL puts on a show. Yeah, not every game's fantastic. I will say that some games are one-sided, just like the game that I saw. Houston Roughnecks steamrolled the San Antonio Brahmas. But the Michigan Panthers and St. Louis Battlehawks game, that was a great game. So, yeah, man, but the way the UFL is really cool. I think more people should watch this. So, it's really cool, man. But yeah, when they were interviewing the coach of St. Louis, Anthony Beck, while the game was happening, so the Michigan Panthers, they have the ball, right? And Anthony Beck has a different headset. He has his coaching headset, and he's wearing the other headset where he talks to the announcers for the TV broadcast. So they were talking to Anthony Beck. Michigan Panthers have a ball. Michigan Panthers, they got a huge play. They made a huge first down, and then Anthony Beck's like, "Oh man." It's so funny. It's like they were talking to him. They were talking to him at the worst time. It's kind of funny. Unlucky timing. And that was it. Interview over. Interview over after that. Yeah. Oh, and St. Louis Battlehawks, they have their new quarterback, new starting quarterback, Max Duggan. Do any of y'all remember that quarterback from TCU? Max Duggan? Yeah. I was like, wow. Because I was watching the end of the NFL draft coverage. So, the host, Reese Davis, was saying, coming up next, pretty soon we're going to have a UFL game tonight. And look who's back, a familiar face. Remember Max Duggan from TCU? Yeah, I do. And it's funny, they were showing, some of his big moments, the 2022 TCU team. Oh my gosh, they beat Michigan in the semifinals. They didn't even show what happened in the championship game against Georgia. We're not talking about that. I'm sorry. With all due respect, actually, this may sound disrespectful, but TCU football, they will always be remembered getting crushed in that championship game against Georgia. They will. Sorry. It's the truth, man. Whether if you like it or not, TCU will always be remembered getting absolutely destroyed in that championship game against the Georgia Bulldogs. They will. They will, man. They will. I'm just saying. But yeah, Max Duggan was playing in that championship game. So, what's crazy? That championship game. Yeah. I know it was a complete blowout. But at one point, let me look this up to see if I'm correct here. Let me look this up. The score card or whatever they call it. Game summary. No. Scoring summary. Yeah. At one point. Yeah. If you remember that championship game between Georgia and TCU in football, Georgia scored pretty quickly, 10-0. TCU scored a touchdown. Max Duggan, 2-yard touchdown run, 10-7. Georgia leading by 3. I'm like, okay, TCU answered back. We got ourselves a ball game here. Not after that. Nope. Not after that, man. Georgia scored 55 unanswered points. That was it. TCU, no more scoring after that. Holy crap. That's all I can say. Smokes. That's just nuts. But it's great to see Max Duggan back. I wish this youngster well. And he played well. He really did, I got mixed up between him, Max Duggan, and Matt Dunnigan. So, if you're wondering who Matt Dunnigan is, If you're a CFL fan like me, then you probably know who he is. Matt Dunnigan is a CFL analyst on TSN, and he was also a quarterback in the CFL. So his name, these two names, they kind of sound similar. You got Max Duggan, the St. Louis Battlehawks quarterback, and then you got Matt Dunnigan, the CFL on TSN studio guy, you know. I got mixed up. I'm like, wait, Max Duggan or Max Dunnigan? Or is it Matt Duggan? Which one's which? I got mixed up. But now I don't get mixed up anymore. I got it in my head. I got it straight into my head. So, yeah. Man, the UFL season, by the time the UFL season comes to an end, that's when CFL season's going to start. So, yeah, great timing. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's great. All right. So I found out that the UFL Championship game, while I was watching the Michigan Panthers St. Louis Battlehawks game, I found out they were showing that the UFL Championship game is going to be on June 14. But it didn't say where the game is going to be, so I did some research and I found out that the UFL Championship game this year will be in St. Louis, the Dome at America Center, and they hosted last year's championship game, okay? And unfortunately, I watched that game. According to Wikipedia, it says the attendance was 27,396, but I watched that game live. It was on Father's Day. I watched that game live with my father, and I saw there was, like, the way I look at it, when I watched that game, after seeing that number, 27,396 attendance, it didn't look like there was 27,000 plus in the stands. To me, it didn't look like there weren't that many people in the stands, you know, because St. Louis Battlehawks, they weren't in the championship game, even though they really should have been. They lost to San Antonio in the semifinals. And San Antonio scored 0 points in that game against Birmingham. What a absolute embarrassment. I bet you St. Louis would have put up a better fight against the Birmingham Stallions. I'm not saying St. Louis would have won that game. Maybe they would have, because they would have the crowd on their side. Although, maybe not, because I mentioned St. Louis Battlehawks. They lost to the semifinals against the San Antonio Brahmas, and that was a Battlehawks home game. So maybe not, you know. So I found out that this year they're also having the UFL Championship game in Birmingham. And it'll be on ABC. Joe Tessitore, Jordan Rogers, Sam Acho, Tom Luganbill will be the network announcers. I like those guys, so that's great. Well, after I found that out, I hope St. Louis Battlehawks get in the championship game. I feel like they need to get in. And you know what? I wouldn't mind if we get a rematch between the St. Louis Battlehawks and the Michigan Panthers. That's a possibility, because the championship game, we got it's between the XFL conference winner against the USFL conference winner. St. Louis Battlehawks, they're in the XFL conference, and the Michigan Panthers, they're in the USFL conference. So this is a possibility. We can get a rematch between those two teams in the championship game. I don't mind that. I just hope Birmingham Stallions doesn't get in it again. I'd rather have any other team get in except for Birmingham. Well, actually, I want St. Louis to get in because they have the best fans and the game is in St. Louis. Maybe we'll somehow get St. Louis Battlehawks against the Houston Roughnecks. That can happen because the Houston Roughnecks are in the USFL conference, even though they should be in the XFL conference. But they should also be the Houston Gamblers. You get my point. All right. So, yeah, I will definitely watch that game live. All right. And I believe this year it will not be on Father's Day Sunday. It'll be the day before. That Saturday. Okay. But I said this before. The UFL Championship game should not be at a neutral site. It should not be. I mean, okay, so last year, when I was watching the game, it looked like hardly anyone was in the stands. Maybe not that empty, but, you know. Last year, it was Birmingham against San Antonio. In my opinion, the better team, the team with the better record should be hosting the game, the championship game. And in this case, it would have been Birmingham. Birmingham would have been hosting the game. Although, I will say this though, since the UFL Championship game is in summer season, at the beginning of summer season, it gets really hot in Birmingham. So maybe I take that back. But at the same time, why start the UFL season in late March? They picked the worst weekend to begin their season. Why I say that? Because, you know, they started their season on the last weekend of March, right? A lot was happening in that weekend. We're in the middle of March Madness at the time. The MLB also began their season that weekend, opening weekend. UFL should not have started their season that weekend. They should have started their season in late February. You know, that's what I put a comment and I think someone replied and they were saying, nah, we need a break. We need a break from football in between the Super Bowl and the UFL. And I'm like, no, we don't. We really don't need a break. Do you not remember when the XFL began their season? They began their season the weekend after the Super Bowl. They did. And I was all in. I was into it. I was ready for it. We don't need a break. Yeah, this year's Super Bowl was a disaster. I get it. But why wait until late March? Like I said, XFL, they didn't start their season. The 2023 and the 2020 XFL season, they didn't wait until late March. They started right away, the weekend after the Super Bowl. USFL didn't do that, though. UFL's doing what the USFL did, starting their season late March. The XFL Championship game, it was in, I believe, the first Saturday of May. The first Saturday of May. Or the first Sunday of May. That's much better. I prefer that way. I prefer it like that. Instead of having your season from late March to mid-June, why not have your season in mid-February to late April or early May? So that way you can have your UFL Championship game not in a neutral site. Obviously, it gets hotter. It gets much hotter in June than it does in May. It does. Everywhere. The whole country. Even Canada. You know? Anyways, Wikipedia also said something on here that I wanted to point out. Um, okay, let me read what it says. Host selection. The UFL awards its championship games to an osten- uh, ostensibly neutral site. I can't pronounce that word, sorry. Chosen among the league's existing home cities. Its lead time is substantially shorter than several years in advance. Notice given for the Super Bowl, the National Football League title. Yeah, they in the NFL they already announce where the next 3 or 4 Super Bowls will be at. That's what they do. The UFL is typically awarded the championship roughly 2 months in advance, early in that year's regular season. In contrast to the 2024 competition, where St. Louis was the runaway favorite over only one other bid known have to been seriously considered, that of Canton, Ohio's Tom Benson Hall of Fame Stadium. The 2025 championship faced multiple scheduling conflicts, most prominently with the 2025 FIFA Club World Cup slated to begin the same weekend. The DC Defenders Audi Field, which is also a soccer venue, which had been an early favorite to host a game, and Lumen Field in Seattle, Washington. Lumen Field used to be called CenturyLink Field. It's host of the Seattle Seahawks, and it was also the host of the Seattle Sea Dragons. So it says Lumen Field in Seattle, Washington, with which the UFL maintains a retainer agreement dating to the Seattle Sea Dragons, were both ruled out due to those stadiums hosting the Club World Cup. That's really strange that the UFL maintains a retainer agreement to the Seattle Sea Dragons Lumen Field, even though the Seattle Sea Dragons are no longer a team. That's why you should bring that team back, because they have the best fans, one of the best fans. If you remember the XFL season in 2023, the Seattle Sea Dragons had great fans. They do. They do. I don't know, maybe they'll do something like that next season, hopefully. All right. The Alamodome, host of the 2023 XFL title game, has a concert the previous day, while Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium in Memphis will be undergoing renovations, and itself has had some of the league's worst attendance. Yep, I did mention that they have the lowest attendance. By October 2024, Protective Stadium in Birmingham had emerged as the favorite venue for the event. Birmingham had been the hub for the 2022 USFL season, but was unable to host the playoffs that year, which were relocated to Canton. By February 2025, the league had soared on Birmingham due to the threat of oppressive summer heat, and with some reluctance, given the high rate of no-shows for the 2024 title game following the St. Louis Battlehawks failing to advance to it, shifted efforts back to the Dome at America's Center, one of 3 dome stadiums, along with the Alamodome and Ford Field, the latter of which was presumed to be too expensive in the UFL. Wow. Man, the UFL, they had their hands tight to decide where the stadium should host a championship game. My prediction before I found out that the UFL was going to be in the UFL Championship game was going to be at the Dome in America's Center again, I thought it would be in Ford Field in Detroit, because that's another indoor stadium That was my prediction, but it turns out it's going to be at the Dome at America's Center again. So the DC couldn't host it because they'll be hosting a FIFA Club World Cup. Alamo Dome has a concert planned the previous day in San Antonio. Memphis, their Simmons Bank Stadium, will be undergoing renovations. Birmingham can't host it because of the summer heat. Ford Field can't host it because they're saying it's too expensive. Plus, Ford Field is an NFL stadium. So, Houston can't host it because it's always hot there. Arlington, same thing. It gets hot there in the summer. Outdoor stadium. So, that's pretty much all the cities that I named, right? So I guess St. Louis is the best stadium, the best venue to host the championship game. It's almost like they're giving St. Louis a second chance because the Battlehawks, they failed to get into last year's championship game. Now I really hope they get in it. They get in it for real, for real. That's the team that I'll be rooting for in the XFL conference. USFL conference, I guess it'll be the Houston Roughnecks, especially after that performance they put on. So, I hope so. But at the same time, man, UFL Championship game, they shouldn't be it shouldn't be at a neutral site. It shouldn't be. What if, actually, nah, never mind. It really shouldn't be. I feel like the better team with the better record should be hosting it. And yeah, I know if you can't have it in Houston, Arlington, Birmingham because it gets really hot there. But like I said, maybe don't have the UFL Championship game in June. Have it like a month earlier. Yeah, it gets hot. It gets hot in May, but not as hot as June. June is a much hotter month than May, and July is a hotter month than June. Even August can be hotter than July. It is, well, at least where I live in South Louisiana, it's always like that. I don't know, man. I really hope St. Louis gets in because they have the best fans. We shall see. But hey, I'm enjoying the UFL so far. The UFL regular season is already half over. Yeah, it's already half over. Week 5 out of 10. This past weekend, it was week 5 out of 10. 5 more regular seasons weeks to go. Man, crazy. You know what else is crazy? This is pretty much all I've been talking about. This episode's almost an hour long, and I talked nothing about the UFL. I'm probably the only person on the internet talking about the UFL for an hour long. You know what's kind of disappointing? I listen to a lot of sports talk shows, and none of them talk about the UFL. None of them. I guess because they don't watch it. Why don't they watch it? I don't know. Maybe a lot of them don't. Maybe a lot of them have no idea that the UFL is a league, a football league, a spring football league. Maybe they just have no interest. Or maybe it's because it's during the MLB season, the NBA and NHL playoffs. I get it. And the same thing with the CFL. Hardly anyone talks about the CFL because the CFL is a Canadian football league. A lot of people in America don't watch that because they don't get the Canadian channels. I'm very lucky and fortunate to get those channels, those networks. That's how I became a CFL fan, basically, is because I have access to their games, their channels. And I love it. I love it. So, but hey, by the time the UFL is over, by the time the UFL season comes to an end, the CFL season will be starting or have already begun. I think it starts I think it's like the first or second weekend of June when the CFL begins their season. So, coming up pretty soon. Anyways, we have hit the 1 hour mark and there's still more to talk about. Goodness gracious. Get your guys something to drink here. I need my water. Stay hydrated because, the weather's warming up. Where I live, it's already getting hot. I think summer season it has already begun in South Louisiana. I predicted it would be hot by Easter, and it wasn't super hot by Easter, but the weekend after Easter, it was hotter. So, and it's going to continue. The temperature is going to keep rising. All right. I mentioned the NFL draft. I always look forward to that every year. Okay. I think the first year where I really watched the NFL draft was in 2014. It was the one where we were all waiting for Johnny Football, Johnny Manziel to get drafted. Remember the great Texas A&M quarterback? Yeah, one of the best college football quarterbacks of all time. And I pretty much watched the NFL draft ever since, mainly round one. I mainly watch round one, okay? This year I wasn't really interested in it because there weren't a lot of names that there weren't a lot of college football player names that I've heard of that are getting into the draft. Some years there's a bunch of names that I heard of. This year, not so much. So this year I didn't really watch much of it. But the big name was obviously Shedeur Sanders, Deion Sanders' son. He didn't get drafted in the first round. He didn't get drafted in rounds 2 and 3. That's crazy. That was surprising. Somehow he didn't get drafted on Friday night, Thursday night, and Friday night. Somehow he missed those nights, but he finally got drafted to the Cleveland Browns. That's right. Let's see here. He got drafted 5th round, 144th pick. So, I wish him well. Most likely he's going to be the backup quarterback. They still have Deshaun Watson, the Cleveland Browns. I don't know if they still have Jameis Winston. Cleveland Browns, they're another team that always suck. It's a shame, that team. That team has never gone to the Super Bowl. Never. Dang, I think that team is cursed. Seems like, all these teams these quarterbacks that get drafted to the Cleveland Browns, it just doesn't go right. Something always goes wrong. Happened to Johnny Manziel. Just Deshaun Watson, Jameis Winston. Although Jameis Winston, he had that one great snow game. So now it's Shador. Now it's Shador Sanders. I wish him all the best. I mean, I wish the Cleveland Browns the best too, because I want to see that team in the Super Bowl one year. You know, I mean, can you imagine if the Super Bowl is the Cleveland Browns against the Detroit Lions, two teams that have never gone to the Super Bowl? That's a Super Bowl that America would watch. America would watch that Super Bowl. I guarantee it. For sure, man. For sure. It's not always the same teams. So, anyways. Um, the main thing that I look forward to the draft every year is the quarterbacks. Which teams are going to get the quarterbacks? Because the quarterback is the most important position. It really is. All right. So, Shador Sanders is a Cleveland Brown. Another quarterback, Jalen Milroe, who played for Alabama, he got drafted to the Seattle Seahawks. Third round, 92nd pick. He is now a Seattle Seahawk. And one more. I listened to this live. This was on Saturday afternoon. Listening to the rest of the NFL draft coverage while I was waiting for the UFL game. Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers played for the Texas Longhorns. He made it to the college football semifinal. He got drafted in the 7th round, 231st pick. He is now a Miami Dolphin. Very interesting. I am kind of surprised that he got drafted that late, because he was in his last college football game was in the playoff. Very surprising that he got drafted this late in the 7th round. Let me see who got drafted last. They call that Mr. Irrelevant. Mr. Irrelevant is a nickname given to the player that got drafted last in the National Football League. A couple years ago, Brock Purdy, the San Francisco 49ers quarterback, he got drafted. He was the last pick in the 2022 NFL draft. A couple years later, he went to the Super Bowl. Isn't that amazing? Mr. Irrelevant made it to the Super Bowl. Wow. And yes, I was cheering for him. I was cheering for the 49ers. Mainly because Mr. Irrelevant was in it. Okay? Let me see here. So this year's Mr. Irrelevant, the last pick of this year's draft, is the name of Kobe Minor to the New England Patriots. He is a cornerback. And he played for Memphis, the Memphis Tigers. Wow. Mr. Irrelevant, more like Mr. Lucky, So. And, NFL draft. Let me tell you something about the NFL draft. Every year, although this year I didn't really do it much, but like the past couple of years, so you know how NFL, they have their own YouTube channel? Well, they also have another one called NFL Throwback, which is a really cool channel when it comes to them showing throwback broadcasts, throwback moments of the good old days of the NFL. And they uploaded a lot of videos, years ago. They have throwback coverage of their old NFL drafts. which were broadcasted on the NFL Network. The host, Rich Eisen. Rich Eisen is one of my favorites to listen to. He's also, he has his own show called The Rich Eisen Show. If you have the Roku channel, the Roku app, that's free. You can listen to his show for free. He has a YouTube channel, posts a lot of videos of his show. Really good. So, Rich Eisen, he's always been the host of the NFL Network's draft coverage. Okay? So, the very first year they hosted it was back in 2006. So I was once watching, excuse me for a moment, I was once watching that video, that NFL throwback video of their first year hosting the draft. So that's really cool. You got to see young Rich Eisen, So, yeah, it's really cool, and I want to see, oh, yeah. They mainly show round one. They only show round one because round one is the most important round, Thursday night, because I want to see, oh, yeah, these quarterback names that I've heard of from the past, Brady Quinn, Mark Sanchez, Tim Tebow. These are quarterbacks. Johnny Manziel, I mentioned, 2014 was the first year I was really watching it, It's really cool. You get to see, oh, this is when he got drafted. I know I can just look it up, but I'd rather listen and watch these old NFL draft round one coverages, you know what I'm saying? So, and it seems like the broadcast back then was better than it is now for both NFL Network and ESPN. I'm not saying the coverage sucks now. Their coverage is great. But back then, especially ESPN, man, I was also watching some of the, the 1990s, early 2000s NFL draft coverages, which were by ESPN. Remember Chris Berman, the greatest of all time, in my opinion, on ESPN? Because he never left. He never left the network. Chris Berman. Everyone loves him. He was the host. And I remember when I first watched the NFL draft, he was the host for, the last couple of years. And then his last year, I believe, was in 2016 or 2017. And then the first year without him, I was like, man, it's not the same. It's not the same without him. Trey Wingo replaced him. And I like Trey Wingo. It's not the same without Chris Berman, It's the same thing when Chris Berman used to host the Home Run Derby. Remember the Home Run Derby? The night before the MLB All-Star Game? I remember when I first watched the Home Run Derby, he was the host of that. And then it's not the same without him, Just like the NFL draft. Would I rather have him, if I can bring him back, would I rather bring him back to the NFL draft or the Home Run Derby? I would bring him back to the NFL draft because Chris Berman has always been an NFL guy. He really has been. I mean, yeah, he did a lot of other things back in the old days, but he's always been an NFL host, announcer guy, So, but yeah, man, I was watching some of these, going through these old draft coverages on ESPN. It looked a lot different, obviously. The broadcast was a lot different, but I think it was much better back then. And same thing with Home Run Derby. I mentioned that. Every year I watch an old Home Run Derby just so I can hear Chris Berman. And I like the old Home Run Derby format. I like the old Home Run Derby rules. I'll talk more about the Home Run Derby when the Home Run Derby approaches, okay? But yeah, I've always liked Chris Berman. So the only time you'll see him is when he does the NFL Primetime. NFL Primetime. With Booger McFarland, you know. Speaking of Booger McFarland, he does both. He does both college football and NFL. That is not easy. Him and Kirk Herbstreit. Kirk Herbstreit does both. He broadcasts, he's an announcer for both college football and the NFL. It's not easy. And there's also another one that does both NFL and CFL. His name is Davis Sanchez on TSN. Davis Sanchez is a TSN studio CFL and NFL analyst. Wow. That's crazy. That's amazing, you know? So, yeah. One last thing. I have not been keeping up much with the NBA and NHL playoffs. Playoffs? I know. So I'm going to go through them. And see what is currently happening. Let's do NBA first because their playoffs began a little before the NHL playoffs. So, let's see here. So they're still in round one. East and West. They're still in round one. All right. All right, I'll do Saturday and Sunday's games because it seems like these teams, they play every 2 to 3 days. Saturday in the East, round one, Cleveland Cavaliers. Wow. They absolutely crushed the Miami Heat in Miami by a score of 124 to 87. The Cavaliers now take a 3-0 series lead. To the West Conference, the Oklahoma City Thunder, they barely beat the Memphis Grizzlies in Memphis by a score of 117 to 115. However, that is enough. They swept the Grizzlies. They have officially won that series 4-0. The Thunder are moving on to the second round. And in the West, the Denver Nuggets, they barely beat the LA Clippers by a score of 101 to 99 in LA, and the series is tied 2-2. And in the West Conference again, the Golden State Warriors beat the Houston Rockets by a score of 104 to 93 in the Bay Area. Golden State takes a 2-1 lead. And on Sunday, wow, the New York Knicks, they barely beat the Detroit Pistons. Oh, the Detroit Pistons are in the playoffs. The Pistons, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, or I should say last season or the season before, they had a terrible win-loss record. That's a great way for them to come back and make it in the playoffs. The Knicks beat the Pistons by a score of 94 to 93 in Detroit, and the New York Knicks have a 3-1 series lead in the East Conference. To the West Conference, the Minnesota Timberwolves beat the LA Lakers by a score of 116 to 113, and Minnesota now takes a 3-1 lead. In the East Conference, the Boston Celtics beat the Orlando Magic in Orlando by a score of 107 to 98. The Celtics take a 3-1 series lead. And in the East again, the Indiana Pacers beat the Milwaukee Bucks in Milwaukee by a score of 129 to 103. The Pacers take a 3-1 series lead. I'm recording this on a Monday. So tonight, Monday night, the Cleveland Cavaliers will take on the Miami Heat in Miami. If Cleveland wins, they will advance to the next round. They have a 3-0 series lead. And I think that's going to happen. Wait a second. I'm looking at their win-loss record. This is crazy. Cleveland Cavaliers, a much better team than the Miami Heat, right? The Cleveland Cavaliers are their win-loss record is 64-18. The Miami Heat, they're 37-45. How in the hell is a team that is below 500, a team that has more losses than wins, how are they in the playoffs? That makes zero sense. And I'm not an NBA fan, so of course it doesn't make sense to me. But see, this shows shows you that too many teams are in the playoffs. It should not be 16 teams. It should not be 16 teams. It should be 12 or 10 or maybe 8 minimum. 8, 10, or 12. If it's 10 or 12, then yes, you're going to have some teams with a bye. Hey, the MLB playoffs are like that. They have 12 teams in it. Some teams get a bye. I'm just saying. Think about it. A 37-45 team in the playoffs. And they're getting embarrassed. That just shows you the Miami Heat don't belong in it. That's embarrassing, man. That's embarrassing. They need to change that. I'm sorry. And the playoffs, this is for both the NBA and NHL. They have the exact same playoff format. 16 teams, all best of 7, and it takes 2 months. The playoffs last 2 months. MLB playoffs, that lasts 1 month. NFL playoffs, that also lasts 1 month. Why can't the NBA and NHL seasons playoffs be 1 month as well? Or a month and a half? That's kind of ridiculous in my opinion. And like I said, I'm not a big NBA fan, so maybe if you're a big NBA fan, it probably doesn't sound ridiculous to you because it's been like this for a long time. Anyways, the other game after the second game tonight will be the Houston Rockets against the Golden State Warriors. And then on Tuesday, this is weird. You have 4 games on Tuesday, but only 2 on Monday. The schedule sucks sometimes. Then you got Tuesday, Milwaukee Bucks against the Indiana Pacers. If the Pacers win, they'll advance. And then you got the Detroit Pistons against the New York Knicks. If the Knicks win, they'll also advance. Then the Orlando Magic against the Boston Celtics. If the Celtics wins, they'll also advance. And then the LA Clippers against the Denver Nuggets. Those two teams are 50-32. Exact same win-loss record. That series is tied at 2 games apiece. Orlando Magic, they're 41-41. They're just at 500. Exactly even. 41-41. It's like that team should not belong in the playoffs. Yeah, I'm just saying. The Miami Heat, 37 wins, 45 losses. You're going to be like, oh yeah, they're not going to be in the playoffs. They're in the playoffs. How? How did they get in? Is that like the worst win-loss record that made the worst win-loss record team that made the playoffs? Is there an NBA team that was 36 and 46 that were in the playoffs? I don't think so. If there is, you let me know. To the NHL now. Let's go to do the same thing. Let's go to Saturday's games. In the East Conference, the Tampa Bay Lightning easily beat the Stanley Cup champions, the Florida Panthers, in Florida by a score of 5-1. The Panthers, however, they are leading that series 2-1. In the West Conference, the Vegas Golden Knights beat the Minnesota Wild in Minnesota in overtime by a score of 4-3. The series is tied 2-2. Back to the East Conference, the Ottawa Senators. How about the Ottawa Senators are finally back in the playoffs? They beat the Maple Leafs, the Toronto Maple Leafs, in overtime in Ottawa by a score of 4-3. But Toronto, they take a 3-1 series lead. So before that game, Toronto was leading 3-0. So that was Ottawa's first win in that series. And back to the West Conference, the Colorado Avalanche shut out the Dallas Stars 4-0. No, not 4-0, by a score of 4-0. And the series is tied 2-2. And on Sunday, to the West Conference, the St. Louis Blues took on the Winnipeg Jets. And the Blues won by a score of 5-1, and that series is tied 2-2. To the East Conference, the Carolina Hurricanes beat the New Jersey Devils by a score of 5-2. The Hurricanes take a 3-1 series lead. The Washington Capitals, they took on the Montreal Canadiens. The Capitals won by a score of 5-2. And the Capitals, they take a 3-1 series lead. And finally, to the West Conference, the Edmonton Oilers, the team that was in last year's Stanley Cup final, the runner-up, they beat the LA Kings in Edmonton by a score of 4-3 in overtime, and that series is tied 2-2. So tonight, Monday night, the two teams in Florida, Tampa Bay Lightning will be taking on the Florida Panthers. And then later that night, the Colorado Avalanche will be taking on the Dallas Stars in Dallas. Okay, so this is ridiculous. They've done this before. I get it. They don't want to have playoff games on at the same time. It's for TV. I get it. So, the Dallas Stars, they're hosting a game at 8:30 p.m. Central. That is way too late on a Monday night. Come on. They've done this before. That's actually ridiculous. That really is. Should be an hour earlier. Because, the first game's at 6 p.m. Central, but that game's in Eastern Time, so that's at 7 p.m. Okay, that's perfect. Have it at 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. Have it at 5 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. Central. So in that case, it would be 6 p.m. Central for the first game. Or excuse me, 6 p.m. Eastern for the first game between the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Florida Panthers, because that's in the East Coast, Eastern Time. Second game should be at 7:30 Central. It should be like that, man. They've done that. They've done this before. On a Monday night, really? You're going to go home you're going to leave the arena after 11 p.m. on a Monday night. Most people go to sleep by 11 p.m. You got school students have to wake up early the next day. You know what I'm saying? If this was on a Friday night or Saturday night, I'm okay with that. Cool. Monday night, 8:30 p.m., puck drop time? That's unacceptable. I don't know if the NBA does that too. I didn't really pay attention to that. Okay, now the NHL, they're doing the same thing that the NBA did. 2 games on Monday night, 4 games on Tuesday night. Very strange, but okay then. Golly, you're gonna have 8 games total on Tuesday night. 4 NBA games, 4 NHL games. This is why it's really hard to become a fan of both NBA and NHL, because their playoffs, why do their playoffs always happen at the same time? Think about that. That is stupid. Whatever. Anyways, Tuesday, 4 games in the NHL. Ottawa Senators at the Toronto Maple Leafs. If the Maple Leafs win, they will advance. The New Jersey Devils at the Carolina Hurricanes. If the Hurricanes advance, if the Hurricanes win, they will advance. The Minnesota Wild at the Vegas Golden Knights. And then the last game, Edmonton Oilers at the LA Kings. It would be cool if the Washington Capitals win the Stanley Cup because, Alexander Ovechkin, he broke the most goals record. That would be cool to see him walk out as a Stanley Cup champion. I did see that, though, back in 2018. Yeah, the Washington Capitals, they beat the Vegas Golden Knights in the 2018 Stanley Cup final. And man, they had a wild parade. I was actually watching some of that parade coverage on NHL Network. Would be cool if they win the Stanley Cup. Dang, that's almost 7 years ago. Time flies. It really does. But I really would like to see a Canadian team win the Stanley Cup. It hasn't happened since, I think, the mid-90s or the late 90s. It was the Montreal Canadiens, the last NHL team in Canada that won the Stanley Cup. Last year's Stanley Cup was the best Stanley Cup, probably the best Stanley Cup I've ever seen, or maybe one of them. But I will say, last year's Stanley Cup was the best sports championship game that I saw last year. I was rooting for Edmonton, mainly because of Connor McDavid, one of the best hockey players right now, if not the best hockey player right now. And Edmonton is a Canadian team. But at the same time, the Florida Panthers, they lost the year before Stanley Cup final in 2023. So it's like, it'll suck for Florida to lose back-to-back Stanley Cup finals. So, but when they won it, I was happy. I was happy for them because it went down to Game 7. Game 7, man. Think about it. The 2 best words in sports. Game 7. Yeah, so. Alright, guys. I'm done talking. That was a very, very long episode. Sometimes it's like that. Yeah. Last weekend of April, we are approaching the month of May. There's a lot of big sporting events that happens in the month of May. I will talk about that in the next episode, which will be on Friday. All right, guys. For those of you that listen to all this, thank you so much. Have a great week. If you're an NBA, NHL playoffs fan, enjoy more of those games. I'll talk to you next time. Peace out. Thank you for listening to Keith Sports News.